What's going on, everybody? Today I'm gonna be starting a new project, a mini jet or a jet john or whatever you want to call it. A $300 crashed and sunk jet ski that I picked up off Marketplace, and a $300 haul, john boat haul. So we're gonna be mashing them together and making something cool. Gonna put the motor from that in that. Yeah, that happened and it sank. So after cutting holes to get to the bolts there to take the manifold off and all that, I think it'll start. Well, maybe if I put the key on. We don't need you anymore. Oh yeah. It's 130 horsepower, 4-stroke, fuel injected. First things first. Decided to take any good parts off this thing that I'm not gonna use, which is accumulating on that bench over there. I'm gonna try my hand at selling them on eBay and see if I can recuperate some of my money from this piece. Try to unbolt anything I possibly can before I cut the top off this thing. May not even have to cut the top off of it, but I figured it'd be easier to get the motor out. I already cut these parts out previously when I was working on it, just to make sure it ran before I started this. This was full of water. That was full of water. It was a whole ordeal. So pretty much got this thing tore down as much as I'm going to. I've been thinking about it. I don't think I'm gonna cut along and take the whole lid off. I don't really need to. I think I'm just gonna cut right there and take that bit off. Then I can have easy access to all this junk. And I'm just gonna cut this little bit off the back here and all that'll come right out real easy. Then I'll pull the motor. Just like that. Now I can reach all that stuff. They really should have made that removable in the first place. If you notice, I'm wearing more than just my normal safety squints. It's because I'm tired of going to the doctor to get stuff removed out of my eyes. It's kind of expensive. That's inconvenient. That ought to make things a little easier. Hose off. Try to not be so itchy. Maybe this will help. Good thing I didn't make much for sparks. This thing, I guess, was like just draining fuel all over the place. I guess just because that's lower than the tank or the fuel level. That would have been cool. Burn the garage down. More fuel in that tank than I had anticipated. Things like 3/4 tank. I think we'll do the right thing with this old fuel and put it in that. Wouldn't want to waste any perfectly good old fuel. Came out way easier than anticipated. I want to keep this engine cradle part here and the jet drive. So I got to start cutting this boat away from that. I think I'm going to start and just take like a Sawzall, probably cut it like right in half here, because I don't need it to go any further than these motor mounts. And then I guess probably with a Sawzall as well, cut along here, because I only need just past these motor mounts on each side and off the jet drive, this whole section all the way back. So we'll start chopping it up and see what I can use. I was pretty shocked to find this bearing is actually good. Thought for sure that thing would be just trashed, because this was a It's kind of a saltwater jet ski. It was on freshwater, but they had access to saltwater, so I'm sure it's been in it. But so far, it's really clean and rust-free, so maybe they didn't have it in the salt. The other thing that's super cool about this ski, these are the tools you need to tear it completely down to that point. Not even all of these. You need like a 10, a 14, and a 12, and that. I hate working on vehicles where you gotta empty the entire toolbox out just to tear it down. Yeah. That's the end of that rant. Well, getting down to it. Got a heck of a mess here. Anyway, it's late. I'm tired, itchy, going to bed. Day 2. Just gonna work on cleaning this up a bit more. I'm gonna cut right along this line and then straight through here, and then I gotta cut from like here back. All that can go away. So just trimming some fat, trying to get the jet pump as slim down as I can, get the motor mounts as slim down as I can, because that's just all extra weight that we don't need. I think I had a little critter living in here. It was eating my oranges. I guess I need to take this whole piece of the pump off here, because that part back there is what's gonna mate to the inside of the transom on the boat. So it's gonna sandwich the transom between these two. I guess I'm tearing this thing completely down as much as I can possibly tear it down. Yay. My God, there's a lot of hoses on this thing. There's one there, one there, and 2 under there that I can't really get pliers or screwdrivers on. So I imagine these jet skis are just a royal pain in the butt to work on when you're not chopping them to pieces to access the little itty bitty things that are very difficult to get to. This thing is in fantastic shape. There's hardly any wear on this thing. The bearings feel great. The bearings on the shaft feel great. I think this was a pretty good ski. This is what we're putting it in. Here we have a 1950 something or other Orlando Clipper, 12-foot John boat. It's pretty much a piece, but it'll be perfect for what we're doing. It's all aluminum. It's got all the rivets. Everybody loves rivets. It's small and not very wide. First things first, got to cut that seat out. I'm gonna go ahead and cut all of it out because I'm not using any of that. And somebody put this plastic on the transom. I got to take that out. Now we just got to make that fit in that. The bugs are running. The Bug Sucker 5.0 out. So I got to take a bunch of measurements because I don't want to take this piece off. It does come off of there, but the bolts are pretty rusty and it's glued into the bottom here really well. And I don't really want to tear that apart because I feel like it'll never seal again. So I'm gonna try to cut a hole in the transom really close to that shape. And then right here is where we will seal it, put the silicone there, and then I'll drill new holes for all my hoses and cables and such. Also have to cut a huge hole the size of this whole thing to fit down into the floor of the boat. So I'm gonna make it where this is the mating surface where it'll seal, and just this little hump part will hang out of the bottom of the boat, exposing the jet. Got it very crudely marked out. We all know I should measure it twice, but we also all know that I'm not going to. We're just gonna cut it and hope I was right the first time. I don't think it'll ever float again. Let's see if it fits. This thing's heavy. angle of this is a little different, but we'll deal with that. That worked better than expected. Yeah, the angle here, obviously, that ain't gonna work. But I was wanting to cut this transom and do something different with it anyway, because I don't really like, I don't know, it's kind of hard to see on camera, but the rear of the boat is like narrower because of the transom. I'm gonna kind of lay the sides out and make the deck a little bit wider, same as the front is. I know you can't really see it on the camera, but it's like, I think it's like 8 or 10 inches difference. Well, after a little bit of pondering to get that back the way I need it, I'm gonna pretty much just be lazy about this and just cut a slit in there on each side. That will allow me to lay the sides out where I want and move the transom where I want, and then I can just overlay a new transom when I get around to it. So cut that. I'm gonna have to cut this a little bit because now it's too long, but I'll cut that and reshape it and fill a piece in there and weld it back together when the time comes. But right now, got that fitting nice. I'm gonna glue this thing in here. And for that, I'm gonna be using this stuff here. I know a lot of people have opinions on what glue to use, but I've had super good luck with this stuff, and I've used it many, many times before and never had any problems with it. So that's what I'm using. I'm gonna glue it down. I'm just gonna pre-drill holes in the aluminum drill bit, and then I got some big like flag bolts that I'm gonna put in there. I'm sure some people say, oh, you should nut and bolt that, but where it bolts in is way back here. I mean, that stuff's like a 1/2 inch thick, plus I'd have to use really long bolts. They're expensive. It just seems like a pain in the butt, so I think it'll be fine. I think the glue alone would probably hold that thing in there. Oh no. Also going to be putting this stuff up into that little gap there, just for safe measures. Shouldn't need it, but it won't hurt. Just in case that silicone don't seal, this will help. So I got this thing all bolted together and silicone together and everything like that. And I started working on putting some of this stuff together. I got the jet drive in, and I ran all these hoses and the shift cables and all that through. Next, I've got to do something better than this. I just smeared some silicone on there just because, but I gotta get some aluminum from back here and probably to like here to try to make that slope a little more gradual. It sticks up pretty bad. So to do that, I went down to the store, got myself a small tank of pure argon, because that stuff ain't cheap. Got a little roll of aluminum. I'm gonna try my hand at welding aluminum. Look how pretty it is. Shiny. I am aware that you're supposed to use a spool gun, but I'm not going to. I'm just gonna run it right through here and run an oversized tip, and hopefully it will work. The other thing I'm gonna do is loosen the tension on this thing super duper loose, so if it does kink or it does get hung up on the tip, hopefully this wheel will slip instead of just bird nesting it. See if it'll feed. we already bound up. I think it's just hooked on the tip because I didn't take the tip out, but it spins, doesn't bird nest it. Well, it worked. It's feeding and it did bind up and it slipped just like I wanted it to, so I think it is gonna work just fine. Now this is 030 wire, but I'm gonna be putting a 035 tip in it, so hopefully it'll have a little bit of wiggle room and won't get stuck to the tip as bad. The other thing I'm gonna do is run my nozzle kind of pulled halfway off so that the tip is recessed in there. That gives you a little bit longer arc, so hopefully with welding this thin gauge aluminum, that should help. Or at least that's what the guy at the store assured me. So we'll see. Last thing is switch this over to this new tank that I got. Little bitty guy here. Which I'm not even gonna complain because the guy at the air gas, they gave me this bottle, which was super cool of them. They were completely out of every other bottle and a customer turned one of these in and didn't exchange it. So they said, well, that guy turned it in, we'll just give you this one. You just pay for the gas. And I was like, take it. I've literally never welded aluminum before, but I am gonna try it, see what happens. I don't have a clue what settings to go by. I know there's a chart in there, but I'm too lazy to read it. I'll figure it out. I'm gonna try a test on this panel here, which is probably the worst piece of aluminum in the world. It's full of every kind of contaminant, but hey, it's a good piece to try on. Let's see what happens. More speed for sure. It's doing something. Well, I don't know what just happened, but I think the trigger just went out. Can't get it to do anything. So, in order to do work, you must first work on your tools to do the work that you set out to do in the first place. So it's double the work all the time. That'll do it. After much fooling around and making just ugly welds, I finally made one that looked like kind of presentable. I mean, it stuck the two pieces together, so it's good enough for me. Well, I'm not proud of it, but I think it's gonna work. I mean, really, for welding aluminum for a whole 5 minutes, I was able to run a bead with no spool gun, so yep, I'm really not complaining. Looks like I had a little fire. Apparently that foam burns pretty good. So I'm gonna start framing out the deck up front and the deck in the rear. And I'm just gonna be using this, I don't know, 1x1 aluminum tubing. It'll be strong enough, hopefully. Turns out chop saw with a wood blade on it cuts aluminum just fine. So I did a bit of fooling around with the welder and I managed to stick together this little bench here where the seats are gonna mount. My welds are not very pretty. That's after I ground them off and made them look better, but this aluminum, it's pretty difficult to weld if you've never done it, especially old crappy aluminum. So I'm figuring it out though. I will eventually get good at it, but right now I'm working on this transom. Now I gotta fill that section in. I'm gonna do the same over here, cut that off, fill that in. Probably gonna leak, but what are you gonna do? I think that's gonna work okay. Not the prettiest welds in the world, but they are getting better. I'm able to run a halfway decent bead now. I think I got my settings a little closer to what they need to be. Those ones didn't turn out too bad until it got to the end and it started getting contamination in it. But just in case, went ahead and smeared a whole bunch of that quad in there. So even if there was a little pinhole in there, that ought to stop it. I think that right there is the best bead I've laid down yet. Ain't that good. Been just going through and welding everything that I tacked up solid, and even some random stuff that was never welded in the first place. And I am just about out of gas. That thing's been resting on empty for a little while now, but it still hasn't ran out. I'm just trying to run it out so I can get it filled, because it's Thursday night and I want to work on it this weekend. So tomorrow morning I want to get the tank filled. So just running beads all over this thing, trying to run that tank out. I think I'm going to start doing the framing for the rear seat. I'm going to put a couple pieces of this, like from right here, straight in front of where that motor is going to sit. So I'm going to make another little bench sort of like this, and yeah, that'll be the rear seats. Well, that's all she wrote. Out of gas. I will continue this tomorrow. So I got to fiddling around with this seat that I pulled out of here, and it actually fits pretty good in there. So I think I may use that for a rear seat. Got a little gap there, but I think I could do something with that, make that work. So that piece there I put on last night, ran out of gas, so it's just dangling in the breeze there. So I think I'm gonna cut that back off, put the motor in, see how much clearance we can get, and slam that seat as tight to the motor as we can. That was easy. I wish every motor would go in that easy. Now I gotta try to remember how everything went back together. It's all over there. And there's about 40,000 hoses and wires that I don't really remember how they came apart, but we'll figure it out. Just got done installing these little bilge pump doodads. Just welded a little strap on there. One on that side. It should work pretty good. These things run up through the jet pump here, and I guess as it blows the water out the back of the boat, it creates suction, which pulls a vacuum on those, acting like a bilge pump. So whenever you're running, those things are sucking water out, which is probably going to be a really good thing, because I'm fully expecting this thing to leak. Well, that's pretty much all I got for y'all today. I'll be finishing up this build in the next video, so stick around, that'll be out soon. And then all kind of other shenanigans that we'll be having in this here Jet John, or jet boat, or mini jet, whatever you want to call it. Piece of junk ghetto jet boat. Anyway, if you like this video, let me know. Hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike button. I think it's gonna rain. Anyway, peace out, Cub Scout.